The CEO's husband suddenly took an unusual interest in me, bringing me an elaborate breakfast. But since I was suffering from terrible morning sickness, I gave it to his personal secretary. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream tore through the office. I ran to see what was happening and froze in my tracks. That morning, I had arrived at the office early as usual, just as the sun was beginning to paint the Charlotte skyline in shades of gold and amber. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 20th floor, illuminating the thick binders of reports on my mahogany desk. My name is Destiny Thompson, and at 34 years old, I had built something I was proud of. I was the CEO of Thompson Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate company that my late father had founded, and that I had grown into one of the most respected firms in North Carolina. The skyline view from my office was a daily reminder of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed. But lately, the view had lost some of its shine. My marriage was crumbling, though I'd been too proud to admit it. For the past 6 months, Darius had been distant, cold, always traveling for business meetings that seemed to multiply by the week. The man who had once called me his queen, his ride or die, now barely looked at me during dinner. And there was a secret I was keeping, a secret growing inside me. 3 months pregnant, and I hadn't told a soul, not even Darius. How could I, when he could barely stand to be in the same room with me? I had barely sat down, with the intention of reviewing some financial projections for our newest development in Myers Park, when the door to my office swung open without a knock. Darius walked in, carrying a pale blue thermal food container, a high-end model I had never seen in our kitchen. Most surprising of all was the radiant smile he wore, a warm and strangely familiar smile I hadn't seen in a long time. He placed the thermal container on my desk with a gentle thud. "Good morning, baby. Happy 3rd anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you." I looked at him, stunned, and then lowered my gaze to the container. Darius, the man who was always busy with endless meetings and constant business trips, had cooked breakfast for his wife himself today. He unscrewed the lid of the container while explaining tenderly, "Lately, I've noticed you looking pale, and I know work is stressing you out. I got up way before dawn this morning to slow cook some chitterlings for you, your favorite soul food to help you get your strength back. Eat them while they're hot." A dense steam rose, impregnating the air with that unmistakable, pungent aroma of chitlins, stewed with spices and peppers. If I had been the Destiny of 6 months ago, I probably would have been moved to tears by this unusual gesture of attention. But ironically, in that moment, that smell became my worst nightmare. I was secretly 3 months pregnant, and morning sickness was torturing me without mercy. Every time I smelled something strong or distinctively animal-like, my stomach twisted in spasms, and a wave of nausea rose up my throat. I held my breath, swallowed hard, and forced a smile. "Thank you, Darius. That's so thoughtful. But I actually just had toast at home. I'm still stuffed." Darius seemed surprised for an instant. The smile froze on his lips before he quickly recovered his usual composure. He pushed the container toward me, insisting with patience. "Toast? That's nothing. Eat a little of this for energy. I spent the whole morning cleaning and cooking these. Don't do me like that." His words sounded soft, but they carried an invisible pressure. I looked into his eyes, searching for a glimmer of sincerity, but I only found a calculating expectation. Just when I was debating how to refuse without offending him, a knock on the door saved me. Jasmine, the new secretary hired 3 months ago, walked in with a stack of documents. Jasmine, 25 years old with smooth caramel skin, expertly laid edges, and a body that she made sure everyone noticed. She was wearing a tight pencil dress that accentuated every curve, paired with designer heels I knew cost more than her monthly salary. Her face, carefully made up with contoured cheeks and glossy lips, radiated an air of seduction and calculated ambition. I'd noticed things about Jasmine over the past few months, little things that didn't quite add up. The way she always found reasons to stop by Darius's office, the expensive bags she carried, switching them out weekly, the way she'd blush and giggle when he walked past her desk. And most telling of all, the way Darius's eyes would linger on her a second too long when he thought I wasn't watching. She placed the documents on the desk with deliberate slowness, shot a flirtatious look at Darius, and then at the container of chitlins, saying in a honeyed voice dripping with false admiration, "Oh, look at the director being so thoughtful, bringing Mrs. Destiny something to build her strength up this early. You are so lucky, Destiny. With a husband who's a perfect 10 like this, nobody can compete." The audacity of it made my stomach turn, and not just from the morning sickness. Here she was, probably sleeping with my husband, standing in my office, praising him to my face. Darius ignored her completely, looked at me to give a few final instructions, and left the office. In that moment, an idea struck me. I smiled and gently pushed the container toward her, my voice hiding a sarcasm that probably no one noticed at the time. "I just ate, and I'm absolutely full, and it would be a shame to waste Darius's effort. Jasmine, have you had breakfast? If not, you eat it for me. The chitlins Darius makes are delicious, and they're still steaming." Jasmine's eyes went wide with surprise, and then her expression shifted to one of jubilation, as if she had hit the lottery. She glanced at Darius's retreating figure, checking for objections. Seeing he didn't oppose it, though he remained silent with a slightly annoyed expression, she grabbed the container with enthusiasm. In a sugary tone, she said, "Well, if you insist. Thank you so much, Destiny. I'll eat it all, won't leave a drop. I'm sure anything the boss cooks is a meal fit for the gods." I watched Jasmine leave my office, hugging the container like it was a treasure, and I felt an immense relief at escaping the imminent heave. I tried to concentrate on work, turning the pages of financial reports, but the numbers danced before my eyes and my head spun. A sense of unease grew inside me, like the heavy, dark sky that precedes a storm. I poured myself a glass of lukewarm water and took small sips to calm the baby moving inside me. 3 years of waiting, and finally, heaven had taken pity on me, granting me this little life. I promised myself I would take care of my health and not let negative thoughts affect my child. About an hour later, while I was absorbed in typing an email to one of our investors, a loud thud was heard from the common work area, as if something heavy had fallen to the floor. The sound echoed through the quiet office like a gunshot. Immediately after, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the silence of the entire floor. It wasn't a common scream of fear, the kind you might hear from someone who saw a spider or got startled. This was something else entirely. It was a scream loaded with extreme, sharp, and horrifying pain. A scream that came from somewhere deep and primal, the kind of sound a human being makes when they're truly suffering. The kind of sound that freezes your blood and makes your heart stop. My heart shrank. A bad feeling washed over me like ice water through my veins. I jumped up from my leather chair so fast it rolled backward and hit the credenza behind my desk. I ran out of my office, my heels clicking frantically on the polished marble floors. Other office doors were flying open. Employees were pouring out into the hallway, their faces confused and frightened. "What's happening?" someone shouted. "Did you hear that?" Another voice called out. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" A woman was crying, her hands covering her mouth. The scene I found when I reached the main work area left me completely frozen. Jasmine was writhing on the floor next to her modern white desk. The container of chitlins was overturned, its contents scattered everywhere across the pristine carpet. The penetrating smell of the stew mixed with the sharp, acrid stench of vomit, creating an unbearable funk that made several people gag and back away. But it wasn't just the smell that was horrifying. Jasmine was clutching her belly tightly with both hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her own flesh through the fabric of her dress. Her beautiful face, which just an hour ago had been flawlessly made up and smiling flirtatiously, was now completely disfigured by pain. Her skin had gone from warm caramel to an ashy grayish pale, drained of all blood and life. Her carefully laid edges were now plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her eyes, those eyes that had been batting flirtatiously at my husband, were rolling back in her head, showing mostly whites. She was foaming at the mouth, literal white foam bubbling at her lips, while her body convulsed uncontrollably. Her legs were kicking out in violent spasms, her designer heels flying off and skittering across the floor. But what terrified me most, what made my own stomach clench in sympathetic horror, was that the lower part of her beige designer dress was slowly staining a deep, dark crimson. It wasn't a small stain. It was blood. Fresh blood flowing freely, spreading across the fabric, pooling beneath her body, soaking into the office carpet in an ever-widening circle. "Someone call 911!" a man's voice shouted from somewhere behind me. "I already did," someone else responded, their voice shaking. "They're on their way." "Get towels! We need towels!" That was Monica from accounting, always the practical one, already running toward the break room. "Don't move her! You're not supposed to move someone when they're like this!" That was Jerome from IT, his face pale as a sheet. Employees were running back and forth, panic-stricken. Some were crying, others were on their phones. A few were backing away, unable to handle the sight. One young intern ran for the bathroom, hand over her mouth. The sounds of retching followed seconds later. Screams and calls to 911 filled the air, creating a cacophony of chaos and terror. I stood there in the middle of it all, hands and legs trembling, unable to move, a lump in my throat so large I could barely breathe. My mind was racing. What on earth was happening? Why was Jasmine like this? What could cause someone to deteriorate so quickly, so violently? And then, the thought hit me like a physical blow. It was the bowl of chitlins I had given her. The realization crossed my mind like a lightning bolt, sending a chill down my spine so intense I actually shivered despite the warmth of the office. At that precise moment, as if on cue in some twisted theatrical performance, the heavy mahogany door to the CEO's private office slammed open with such force it banged against the wall. Darius ran out, but not like a concerned boss rushing to help an employee in distress. No, this was different. He had a look of pure, unadulterated panic on his face, an expression I had never seen on him in all our years together. Not when we'd lost a major deal. Not when the market crashed in 2020. Not even at his father's funeral. But here's what was strange. What made my blood run cold. He didn't run to help his employee. He didn't rush to Jasmine's side to check if she was okay. He didn't ask what was wrong or call out her name. He didn't even look at her face. He stopped dead about 5 feet away from her convulsing body, his expensive Italian leather shoes just at the edge of the pool of blood. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated with what I could only describe as shock and horror. But he wasn't looking at Jasmine's face. He was staring, fixated, at the pool of blood spreading across the floor, at the overturned container, at the scattered food. His gaze swept the scene like a detective taking in a crime scene. And I saw it. I saw the exact moment when the full picture registered in his mind. I clearly saw the expression on his face morph through a series of emotions in rapid succession. First, stupor, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then fear, raw and primal. And finally, something that made my heart stop. A demented, barely controlled rage. His jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides, a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. Then he snapped his head up, and his gaze, sharp and dangerous as a dagger, locked directly onto me. Our eyes met across the chaos of the office, across the panicked employees, across Jasmine's dying body. That look. God, that look will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't the look of a husband worried about his wife seeing such a horrible, traumatic scene. It wasn't the protective instinct of a man wanting to shield his wife from violence and blood. Nor was it that of a boss feeling pity and concern for his employee lying on the floor, possibly dying. No. This was something else entirely. It was the look of a killer, a predator, a hunter realizing that his carefully laid trap had caught the wrong prey. It was the look of a man whose plan had gone catastrophically wrong, and who was now desperately trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. It was the look of pure, cold-blooded calculation, mixed with barely controlled fury. In that split second, I understood everything. Or at least, I understood enough to be absolutely terrified. Before I could process what was happening, before I could back away or call for help, he was striding toward me with long, aggressive steps. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm with a force that was shocking in its violence. His fingers dug into my flesh like claws, so hard I could feel each individual fingertip bruising my skin through my silk blouse. I cried out in pain, but he didn't loosen his grip. He pulled me close, so close I could smell the coffee on his breath, see the rage burning in his eyes. He hissed through clenched teeth, his voice trembling with barely contained fury, each word dripping with accusation and disappointment. What did you do? Why? Why her? The question hung in the air between us, illogical and completely insane. That illogical and accusing question was like a bucket of ice water being dumped over my head, snapping me back to reality from the shock-induced haze I'd been in. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing around, not making sense. Why was he asking what I had done? I had done nothing. I had simply given away food that he had brought me, food that he had prepared with his own hands, food that he had insisted I eat. And more importantly, more chillingly, why was he so clearly disappointed, so visibly enraged that the person lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood was Jasmine, and not me? The implication hit me like a freight train. I looked deeply into Darius's bloodshot eyes, and felt a terrifying truth begin to reveal itself. I slapped his hand away, trying to maintain composure, and responded with an icy voice. "What did I do? I just gave her the bowl of food you cooked." "What are you thinking, Darius? Were you expecting it to be me on the floor?" Darius froze, as if realizing he had said too much. He let go of my arm, took a step back, and wiped his hand over his face to hide his confusion and panic. The sound of ambulance sirens resonated from the street below, breaking the suffocating tension between us. The paramedics came up quickly, placed Jasmine on a stretcher, and whisked her away. Darius ran after them, but before entering the elevator, he turned to look at me with eyes that still distilled hatred and threat. He ordered me, "You have to come to the hospital too. This happened because of the stew you gave her. Don't try to dodge your responsibility." I watched the elevator doors close and swallowed my tears. The husband I once loved and trusted blindly had revealed himself to be a complete stranger, a calculating and evil man. That bowl of chitlins, if it hadn't been for the nausea, and if I hadn't given it to Jasmine, the person now lying in a pool of blood would be me, and my little baby would have shared my tragic fate. A cruel truth was beginning to take shape. Darius didn't want to take care of me. He wanted to kill our child, or maybe even me. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. I would go to the hospital, not out of fear of his threats, but to witness with my own eyes the true face of this man. Sitting in the cold plastic chair of the waiting room, I interlaced my hands tightly to stop the trembling coursing through my body. The fluorescent light overhead reflected on the tiled floor, creating a spooky sense of loneliness. Darius, the man with whom I had shared my life for 3 years, paced back and forth in front of the ER doors like a caged beast. He ran his hands through his hair, bit his nails, and occasionally shot me sideways glances, a mix of suspicion and hate, but didn't dare approach. Seeing his impeccable suit now wrinkled, I felt a deep bitterness. What was this man worried about? The life of his little mistress, or the fear that some dark secret would come to light? Finally, the ER doors opened, breaking the stifling silence. A middle-aged doctor walked out and removed his mask, revealing a serious and tired face. Darius lunged at him like an arrow, voice cracking with tension. "Doctor, how is she? Is it serious?" I stood up slowly and approached, trying to keep my breathing calm. The doctor looked at both of us, his gaze lingering on Darius a moment longer than normal, before reporting slowly. "The patient suffered acute poisoning. Luckily, she arrived in time and is out of danger. However, the cause of the severe hemorrhage was the ingestion of a large amount of misoprostol." The medical name made me frown, but for Darius, it seemed to be a devastating blow. His face lost all color. His lips moved without emitting a sound. The doctor continued explaining in a firmer tone. "It's a drug used to induce uterine contractions, either to facilitate labor or to induce an abortion. With the extremely high dose we found in her gastric contents, it is clear this is intentional poisoning, not simple food poisoning. Following protocol, we have informed the police." Barely had he finished speaking when 2 uniformed officers appeared at the end of the hallway. They approached seriously and asked us to cooperate with the investigation. At that moment, Darius seemed to snap back to reality. He hurriedly wiped beads of sweat from his forehead, attempting to regain the composure of the CEO he usually portrayed. He turned and pointed a finger at me, voice trembling, but full of accusation. Officers, you need to investigate this thoroughly. This morning, I prepared a stew for my wife. She had the container in her office for a long time before giving it to Miss Jasmine. I suspect my wife, out of unfounded jealousy, put something in it. I looked at Darius, feeling as if someone were squeezing my heart. He already had his alibi ready. If I had eaten the stew, I would have lost my child. Since someone else ate it, he would blame me for poisoning. I took a deep breath, looked straight at the older officer, and said calmly, "I have no motive to do something like that. You can check the hallway cameras, look for fingerprints on the medicine bottle if you find it. And most importantly, I would like to know why a stew my husband claims he prepared to take care of me contained an abortion drug, and why it affected his secretary so severely." The officer nodded, taking notes, and then asked the doctor a question that left us both breathless.
Doctor, what is the specific condition of the victim? What consequences has the use of this drug had?
The doctor sighed, his voice turning grave and sorrowful.
The patient, Miss Jasmine, was 6 weeks pregnant. Due to the massive dose of the drug, which caused extremely violent uterine contractions, we regret to inform you that the fetus could not survive.
The world around me seemed to freeze. I heard Darius let out a choked moan. His legs gave way and he collapsed into the waiting room chair. His face was unhinged, eyes wide open, staring into the void. So that was it. That young, beautiful secretary was carrying his child, and he himself, with his evil plan destined for his own wife, had unknowingly ended the life of his illegitimate child, whose existence he probably wasn't even aware of. Seeing his pitiful state, I felt no satisfaction, only a wave of disgust rising in my throat. Whether the love he had professed to me or the passion he felt for his mistress, it all reduced to nothing in the face of his selfishness and cruelty. After receiving the shocking information from the doctor, the police officers decided to question Darius and me separately right there in the hospital. I was invited to sit in a quieter corner of the hallway across from the older officer, whose gaze was sharp but serene. He looked at me without judgment, almost with compassion, and asked kindly, "Ma'am, please relate in detail everything that happened from the moment you received the food container until the incident occurred. Try to be as precise as possible. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small it seems." I closed my eyes, rewinding the movie of that fateful morning. I told him how Darius had appeared suddenly with excessive attention, something that had completely disappeared from our marriage in the last 6 months. I told him about the intense smell of the chitlins that triggered my nausea. I explained that I only opened the lid, looked, and closed it immediately. I emphasized every word. From the moment he left the thermos on my desk until Miss Jasmine entered, I didn't move from my chair, nor did I open the container again. It was always in sight and completely untouched. I gave it to Jasmine simply because I couldn't eat it, and she seemed enthusiastic about the idea. On the other side of the hallway, Darius was being questioned by a younger officer. He insisted on the cleanliness of his cooking process. He claimed, "I went to the market myself, got in the kitchen, and prepped that stew from the crack of dawn. I'm a very meticulous person. I never let the housekeeper touch my wife's food. As soon as I finished, I put it in the thermos and brought it directly to the office without it passing through anyone's hands." Darius was convinced this statement would present him as an exemplary husband, while simultaneously pointing to me as the only suspect, the only person who had been in contact with the container in a closed room. But in his panic, he had forgotten something fundamental. The more he insisted he was the only one who prepared everything, the more he put the noose around his own neck. if it was proven the poison was already in the stew from the beginning. When the questioning session paused, the older officer approached his colleague, who was taking notes on Darius's statement. They exchanged a few words in low voices, casting furtive and significant glances toward Darius. Noticing this, he became even more nervous. He jumped up, raising his voice more than usual to hide his fear. "Investigate thoroughly. My wife has been very jealous lately. She's not right in the head. Who knows? Maybe she slipped the poison in when I left the office." I listened to every one of his cruel words. How painful. The man I once loved was now trying by all means to put me in prison to save himself. I stood up, walked over to them, looked Darius directly in the face, and asked with surprising calm, "Darius, if you think it was me, what would be my motive? To kill your secretary? Or are you afraid they'll discover that stew wasn't for Jasmine but for me?" Darius started. His eyes darted nervously, avoiding my gaze. He stammered, "You? What nonsense are you talking about?" Time passed with agonizing slowness. Every minute of waiting for the lab results was mental torture. I remained seated in silence, hand resting gently on my belly in an instinctive gesture to protect the little being caught in the eye of the hurricane. Finally, a forensic technician came out with the results in hand. He announced in a grave voice, "On the rim of the thermos and on the spoon, we found fingerprints belonging to Mrs. Destiny and the victim, Miss Jasmine, which matches the statements. However, the crucial point is that the toxic substance was completely dissolved in the stew, impregnating every piece of meat and juice. This proves the drug was added during cooking or immediately after, while the stew was still very hot and stirred in well, not simply sprinkled on top once the container was closed." This conclusion was like a bucket of ice water for Darius, completely destroying the theory he had tried to construct to blame me. If I had added the drug upon receiving the thermos in the office, it wouldn't have dissolved so uniformly. Darius's face changed color, passing from pale white to an ashy gray. He started rambling, losing control. "No, it can't be. Surely it was Jasmine who took the medicine. That's it. She was pregnant. She wanted an abortion and took the pill before eating. You have to investigate her. Don't accuse an innocent man." I looked at the pathetic scene of my husband, feeling a mix of laughter and pity. The man who was once my pride was now revealed as a coward, incapable of facing the consequences of his acts. I raised my voice, cutting off his ravings firmly. "Darius, stop kicking and screaming. If Jasmine took the medicine on her own, why was it also in the stew? Are you going to say she took it and then vomited into the thermos? Does your explanation sound logical?" Darius spun around abruptly, eyes bloodshot. "Shut up. What do you know? You hate me. You want to destroy me, and that's why you staged this whole circus. It was you. You slipped it in secretly when I wasn't looking." His obstinacy made even the police officers shake their heads, weary. The lead officer closed his folder and looked at Darius with glacial coldness. "Mr. Darius Thompson, your statement and the forensic results present many contradictions. We need you to accompany us to the station to clarify some matters. Furthermore, we will request the recordings from your car's dashcam and the security cameras in your home kitchen to verify the preparation process you described." Hearing the word cameras, Darius jolted as if he had received an electric shock. I knew perfectly well we had a camera in the living room that pointed directly at the kitchen, and his luxury sedan had a camera recording all his trips. Those were the proofs that wouldn't lie. If he really added the drug to the stew, he undoubtedly would have left some trace. Darius's gaze wavered violently. His initial confidence had vanished completely, giving way to the naked fear of a criminal before the bench. He knew the trap he had set for his wife was now closing around his own neck. I stood up, straightened my clothes, and looked at my despicable husband for the last time before they took him away. Darius, you once said this stew was full of your love. Now I understand that your love actually smells like poison. Luckily, fate wanted our child not to share the same luck as that poor baby. I left him standing there in the middle of the cold hospital hallway and walked away without looking back, silently thanking life for giving me a chance to survive and seek justice for myself and for the child I carried in my womb. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. The thought of being alone in that big, empty house with Darius made my skin crawl. Instead, I took a cab straight back to the office, even though it was already past 7 in the evening and the sun was setting over the Charlotte skyline. The sky was gray and heavy with dark clouds swirling overhead like an omen of a great storm brewing, an exact reflection of my turbulent state of mind. The air felt thick and oppressive, charged with electricity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Entering the building lobby, I immediately felt the weight of curious stares and heard the whispers of the remaining employees who were working late. The news of Jasmine's poisoning had spread like wildfire through the company, jumping from department to department, floor to floor, faster than any official communication could have traveled. I could hear fragments of conversations as I walked past. Heard she almost died. The CEO's wife gave it to her. Jealous rage, that's what I heard. But why would she poison her own secretary? You know why. Everyone knows about Darius and Jasmine. The rumors were of all kinds, but the most malicious, the one that made my blood boil, was the whispered theory of the jealous boss, who, discovering her secretary was pregnant by her husband, had tried to poison her to teach her a lesson. Hearing those inventions, those lies based on assumptions and gossip, hurt like knives being twisted in my back. Each whisper felt like a personal attack, but I knew I couldn't break down now. Not here. Not in front of them. I had to be strong, had to stand firm if I was going to discover the truth and clear my name. I went directly to my office, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor in the otherwise quiet building. I entered and slammed the door behind me, physically and symbolically isolating myself from the gossip and judgment outside. I leaned against the door for a moment, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hand instinctively went to my belly, to the small life growing there that had almost been destroyed by a bowl of poisoned food. "I'm going to protect you," I whispered to my unborn child. "I promise you, baby. Mama's going to figure this out." I walked to my desk, kicked off my heels, my feet were killing me after the long day, and sat down heavily in my leather chair. For a moment, I just stared at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness outside my window. Then I got to work. Shortly after I'd settled in, there was a gentle knock on my door. I tensed, wondering if it was Darius coming to continue his accusations, or perhaps the police with more questions. "Come in," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The door opened, and Gabrielle stepped in. Gabrielle had been my executive assistant for the past 5 years, ever since I'd taken over as CEO. She was 42, sharp as a tack, loyal to a fault, and honestly, she knew more about running this company than half the board of directors. She had smooth, dark skin, her hair always styled in an elegant updo, and she wore sensible but stylish business suits that commanded respect. More importantly, Gabrielle had been with me since the beginning of my career, back when I was just my father's assistant, learning the business from the ground up. She'd seen me grow, struggle, succeed, and fail. She knew me better than almost anyone, and I trusted her implicitly. She walked in with a worried expression etched on her face, but her eyes held a look of fierce determination. She was carrying her laptop and a flash drive, and she placed both on my desk before sitting down across from me. "Destiny," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I did what you asked. I pulled all the security camera footage from the building and the parking garage for this morning. And girl, I found something very strange, something that doesn't add up at all." My heart started racing. "Show me." Gabrielle plugged the flash drive into my computer, and black and white security footage appeared on my large monitor. She leaned over and pointed to the timestamp in the corner of the screen. "Look carefully at this. Mr. Darius's car, that black Mercedes S-Class, entered the garage at 7:15 a.m. You can see it right here pulling up to his reserved spot on level P2. I watched as Darius's sleek luxury car glided into frame and parked smoothly in his designated space. The driver's door opened, and I could see his figure emerge, carrying what looked like a briefcase and the blue thermal container. "Okay," I said slowly. "So he arrived at 7:15. What's strange about that?" Gabrielle fast-forwarded the footage. "Here's what's strange. He didn't get out of the elevator to come to your office until 8:15 a.m. Look, here's the timestamp on the executive floor elevator camera. 8:15 exactly. That's when he shows up with that container and walks into your office." She was right. The footage clearly showed Darius stepping out of the elevator onto our floor at 8:15, still carrying the thermal container, looking fresh and composed. "Normally," Gabrielle continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "it takes less than 5 minutes from the garage to your office. I've timed it myself. Park, walk to the elevator, ride up to the 20th floor, walk down the hall. 5 minutes, maximum. 7 if the elevator is slow." My mind was racing, doing the math. So where was he for an entire hour? From 7:15 to 8:15? What was he doing? Gabrielle's expression was grim. "That's the question, isn't it? An hour missing. That's more than enough time to carry out any kind of dark plan." I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warmth of the office. "Can we see what he did during that hour? Are there other cameras?" "I checked every camera in this building," Gabrielle said, pulling up more footage. "The garage cameras show him getting out of his car at 7:15, but then he disappears. He doesn't head toward the main elevator. Instead, look at this." She showed me another angle. Darius, still carrying the container, walked quickly toward the far end of the garage, away from the main bank of elevators that everyone used. "Where's he going?" I asked, leaning closer to the screen. "The emergency stairwell," Gabrielle replied. "The one that hardly anyone uses, because it's a pain to climb 20 floors. But here's the thing. That stairwell has a door on every floor, including the basement level where the building's mechanical rooms are. It's always locked, but executives have master key cards." "The mechanical rooms," I repeated, my mind spinning. "What's down there?" "Storage, maintenance equipment, the break room for the building's custodial staff, and—" Gabrielle paused significantly. "A full kitchen. The building management keeps it stocked for the cleaning crew who work overnight shifts. It's got a stove, microwave, refrigerator, everything you'd need to prepare food or reheat something." My blood ran cold. He went down there to do something to the food, to add something to it. That's where that missing hour went. That's what I think, Gabrielle agreed. And there's more. Look at this. She advanced the video to a recording from another camera, this one positioned in the basement level near the emergency stairwell area. The footage was grainy. These cameras were older than the ones in the main building, but it was clear enough. Look at this person right here. Pay close attention. On the screen appeared the silhouette of a man in a white dress shirt and dark slacks, wearing a medical-style face mask that covered the lower half of his face. He was walking in a hurry, practically jogging, and he was carrying a fairly large black trash bag that looked heavy and bulky. Instead of heading toward the main elevators, he was moving stealthily from the elevator area toward the dumpster area behind the building, avoiding the regular trash disposal areas on the office floors. "Who is that?" I asked, though something about the person's gait seemed familiar. "Watch how he walks," Gabrielle said. "See that slight hunch in his shoulders? The way he keeps looking around nervously? That distinctive fade haircut?" And then I saw it. "Terrell," I breathed. "Bingo," Gabrielle confirmed. "That's Terrell, all right. Darius's personal assistant and his distant cousin. That loyal little lapdog who follows him around and does whatever he's told without question." Terrell was 35, had been working for Darius for the past 6 years, and was absolutely devoted to his cousin. Too devoted, in my opinion. The kind of devotion that came from owing someone money or favors, or both. But why is Terrell down in the basement at... I checked the timestamp. 7:45 in the morning, throwing away a suspicious bag through the emergency exit. What's in that bag? Gabrielle's eyes were hard. That's exactly what I asked myself. Why did he have to go down to throw trash away secretly via the emergency stairs at that hour? Why not just use the regular trash cans on his floor? And what was in that black bag that was so important it needed to be hidden? The implications were staggering. "The evidence," I said slowly. "The medicine packaging, the gloves he wore while handling it, maybe even the original container the drug came in. All the evidence of the crime Darius wanted to make disappear after preparing his deadly stew during that lost hour." "That's exactly what I think," Gabrielle said, her voice vibrating with controlled anger. "And here's the kicker. I sent someone to check the dumpster area, but the garbage truck just passed about half an hour ago. The trash is gone. It's been compacted and hauled off to the dump by now." I slumped back in my chair, feeling defeated for a moment. So the evidence is gone. We can't prove anything. But Gabrielle's expression shifted into something that looked almost like a smile. "Well, here's the thing about Terrell. He's cautious, yes, paranoid even, but he's also cheap as hell and kind of stupid. I've worked with him for years, and I know how his mind works." "What do you mean?" "Terrell doesn't usually throw important things into common trash immediately," Gabrielle explained. "He's the kind of guy who worries about people going through his trash, finding receipts, tracking his movements. So he often hides things first, planning to get rid of them later when he feels safer. He's got a storage unit he rents, a locker at the gym, places like that where he stashes stuff." "So you think the evidence might still exist somewhere?" "I think it's worth looking into," Gabrielle said. "I've already got someone following him, discreetly, of course. If he leads us to wherever he's keeping that bag, we might be able to get our hands on real, physical evidence." I felt hope flickering in my chest for the first time since this nightmare began. I reached across the desk and squeezed Gabrielle's hand. Thank you, Gabrielle. Right now, you're the only person I can trust. I mean that. Gabrielle squeezed back, her eyes softening. You've always been good to me, Destiny. You gave me opportunities when other people wrote me off because I didn't have a fancy degree. You trusted me. Now it's my turn to have your back. She stood up, preparing to leave, but paused at the door. Be careful, okay? Darius and Terrell are cornered animals right now, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. They might try something desperate. After she left, I sat alone in my office, the security footage still playing on loop on my screen. I watched Darius's mysterious hour-long disappearance, watched Terrell skulking through the basement with his suspicious bag, watched it all over and over, memorizing every detail. That lost hour, that black bag. Those were the keys to turning the tables, to proving that Darius had tried to kill me and our unborn child. I pulled out my phone and started making notes, building a timeline. 7:15 a.m. Darius arrives in garage. 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. Missing hour. Basement, mechanical room, kitchen. 7:45 a.m. Terrell disposes of suspicious black bag. 8:15 a.m. Darius appears on executive floor with container. 8:20 a.m. Darius brings container to my office. 9:30 a.m. Jasmine collapses after eating the food. An hour was plenty of time. Plenty of time to add poison to food. Plenty of time to clean up. Plenty of time to make sure everything looked perfect before bringing me my anniversary breakfast. I looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline, at the lights of the city twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Darius was probably congratulating himself on his cleverness, thinking he'd gotten away with it, thinking he could blame me and walk away clean. But he was wrong. The web of lies he and his accomplices were weaving was starting to show mortal cracks, and I was going to rip that web apart, thread by thread. The rain outside showed no signs of letting up. Heavy drops pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating long trails of water like indelible scars running down the glass. I was still sitting in my office well past midnight, the only light coming from my computer monitor, which illuminated my tired face. But despite my exhaustion, my eyes burned with determination. Gabrielle, bless her soul, had just placed a thin dossier in front of me on my desk. It was maybe 20 pages, but its weight felt immense, like it contained the truth about my entire life. She spoke in a low voice, her tone filled with indignation on my behalf. Destiny, look at this. I asked a contact in the building administration to check it out. That luxury apartment where Jasmine lives, the one in Myers Park with the doorman and the rooftop pool, it's not rented by her. The lease isn't in her name at all. I picked up the first page of the dossier. Then whose name is on it? It's in the name of a commercial services company. Gabrielle replied, her finger pointing to the highlighted text, TD Management LLC. The name jumped out at me like a slap in the face. TD Management LLC. It sounded legitimate, professional, like one of the hundreds of shell corporations that existed for tax purposes and asset protection. But I had never heard of it in connection with our company's legitimate business dealings. Who's the legal representative? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I knew the answer. The legal representative of that company, Gabrielle said, her voice dripping with disgust, is precisely Terrell Davis, Darius's assistant and cousin. Of course it is, I muttered, flipping through the pages. Of course. Gabrielle continued her analysis, now pointing to the attached bank statements that she'd somehow managed to obtain. I didn't ask how, and she didn't volunteer the information. Some things were better left unknown. The monthly rent for that apartment is $2,500, plus HOA fees of another $400. Utilities, parking, building amenities, it all adds up to about $3,200 a month, all transferred punctually from the account of TD Management. I did the math quickly in my head. Nearly $40,000 a year just for an apartment for his mistress. But here's where it gets really interesting, Gabrielle said, pulling out another sheet with highlighted numbers. The funds arriving in that TD Management account come from a slush fund that Darius created under the company books. It's listed as representation expenses and client entertainment. I felt sick to my stomach. Client entertainment. He's been stealing from the company, from my father's company, to pay for his mistress's love nest. Gabrielle nodded grimly. Approximately $4,000 a month flows through that account. The rent, plus what I assume is spending money for her. Shopping, dinners, that designer bag collection she's always showing off. I smiled bitterly, a smile that didn't reach my eyes and certainly didn't touch my soul. $2,500 a month for rent, not counting living expenses, shopping sprees, and luxury handbags. Meanwhile, the dress I was wearing at that very moment was 3 years old and worn. I'd had it dry cleaned so many times that the fabric was starting to thin at the seams. The purse sitting on my credenza was a modest brand I'd bought on sale at TJ Maxx for barely $50. I used it every day, and the handles were starting to fray. For the past year, Darius had been complaining constantly about the company's difficulties, about market pressures and rising costs and shrinking margins. He'd asked us to tighten our belts, to defer our own bonuses, to secure our future. He'd made speeches at company meetings about fiscal responsibility and shared sacrifice. I thought back to 6 months ago, when I'd mentioned wanting to update my aging car, and Darius had gone on a long lecture about how we needed to be conservative with our spending until the market improved. Meanwhile, he was dropping $40,000 a year on an apartment for a 25-year-old secretary. The future he was worried about, I said aloud, my voice hollow, wasn't our family's future. It was securing the luxurious love nest for his little mistress. I turned to the next page and found a series of photographs taken secretly. They showed Jasmine entering an elegant private clinic in South Park. The photos were time-stamped from 2 weeks ago. "What is this?" I asked. Gabrielle leaned over to look. I had her followed for a few days after I started getting suspicious about the expensive apartment. She went to that clinic. It's an OBGYN practice, very exclusive, very expensive. The kind of place that caters to women who can pay cash for discretion. So she knew, I said slowly. Jasmine knew she was pregnant. This wasn't some surprise that caught her off guard. She'd been to the doctor. She'd had it confirmed. 2 weeks ago, Gabrielle confirmed. Which means she had time to tell Darius, time to plan what she was going to do with that information. I looked at Jasmine's young, smooth face in the photograph. She was smiling, looking relaxed and happy as she walked into the clinic. Behind that naive appearance, that sweet smile and innocent act, there had been hiding a calculated operator who knew exactly what she was doing. She'd been using that pregnancy as a strategic card, leverage to force Darius to make a decision, probably threatening to tell me, to go public, to destroy his marriage and his reputation unless he left me and made her the new Mrs. Thompson. She'd wanted to become the lady of the house in one fell swoop, to destroy my happiness so she could build her own castle on its ruins. But what she hadn't counted on, what she couldn't have known, was that the man she had chosen as her pillar, as her meal ticket and future, was a cold-blooded monster who was willing to cruelly dispose of his own unborn child to protect his interests and his assets. The irony was almost too much to bear. Darius had tried to poison me to get rid of our baby, and in doing so, he'd accidentally killed the other baby, Jasmine's baby, instead. "There's one more thing," Gabrielle said quietly, pulling out a final document. "I had our IT department pull Darius's email records for the past 3 months. They're technically company property, so it's not illegal. Look at this." She showed me an email thread between Darius and someone named SM. The emails were vague, coded, but the meaning was clear enough if you knew what you were looking for. From Darius Thompson to SM. Subject: that thing we discussed. Can you help me with that matter we talked about? Need something effective but subtle, willing to compensate appropriately. The response, sent from a Gmail account. From SM to Darius Thompson. I can get what you need, but this is serious, D. You sure about this? No going back. And Darius's reply. I'm sure. The situation has become untenable. Need to resolve it quickly and cleanly. Who's SM? I asked, though I was already forming a theory. Simone Miller, Gabrielle said. Ring a bell? The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Simone. Darius's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he dated before me. The very same, Gabrielle confirmed. And get this, she's a pharmacist, works as a pharmaceutical sales rep for a big medical supplier. She has access to all kinds of medications, including restricted ones. Of course Darius would use an ex-girlfriend, someone he could manipulate with old feelings or promises of rekindling their romance. Someone with access to the exact kind of drug that had almost killed Jasmine and would have killed me. Where is she now? I asked. Still in Charlotte, still working her sales job, still, as far as I can tell, communicating with Darius via burner phones and encrypted apps. Gabrielle paused. Destiny. I think she's the key to all of this. She's the weakest link in their chain. She provided the weapon, the poison. But I'm guessing she's not a professional criminal. She's an educated woman with a career and a life to lose. I nodded slowly, understanding where Gabrielle was going with this. She did this for money, or for love, or for some twisted combination of both. But now that someone's been hurt, now that the police are involved, she must be terrified. Exactly, Gabrielle agreed. And here's the thing. I'm willing to bet that Darius has a plan to throw her under the bus if things go south. He'll say she gave him the drug on her own, or that she tricked him, saying it was a vitamin supplement or something harmless. He's already trying to blame you and blame Jasmine. It's only a matter of time before he tries to blame Simone, too. A plan was forming in my mind. A dangerous plan, but one that might work. I need to meet with Simone, I said, face to face. I need to show her exactly what kind of position she's in, what kind of future Darius has planned for her. Between going to jail for her old flame or testifying against him to get leniency, I trust Simone is smart enough to choose the right path. Gabrielle looked worried. That's risky. What if she warns Darius? What if she's more loyal to him than we think? Then I'll be no worse off than I am now, I said. But I don't think she is. I think she's scared and probably already regretting getting involved. I just need to give her a way out, a path to save herself. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain still pouring down on the city. The net was cast, and the most important prey had been located. I knew the imminent meeting with Simone would be a game of mental chess, a psychological battle where one wrong move could destroy everything. But I held the aces. I had the truth. I had the evidence. And most importantly, I had something Darius didn't have. I actually cared about the innocent life growing inside me. Those who sow the wind will inevitably reap the whirlwind. And Darius had sown a hurricane. 3 days later, I drove to the place I had agreed upon with Simone. It was a discreet coffee shop in an alley off Trade Street in uptown Charlotte, the kind of place where business people met for confidential conversations. Elegantly decorated with exposed brick walls and soft jazz playing in the background. And most importantly, it was equipped with a sophisticated security camera system that recorded every corner clearly. I'd done my research. I had sent Simone a simple message from a burner phone. We need to talk about Darius. Come alone. This is your only chance to save yourself. I chose a table in a corner booth from where I could see the entrance without losing privacy. I ordered a decaf coffee. Caffeine wasn't good for the baby, and sat stirring it slowly, trying to calm my racing mind before the storm that was approaching. At precisely 2 p.m., the agreed time, Simone appeared at the entrance. She entered with the sophisticated and confident air of a successful woman who was used to getting what she wanted. She wore a wine-colored silk dress that accentuated her curves and light brown skin, paired with designer heels and a handbag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was pressed straight and hung to her shoulders, and she wore sunglasses covering half her face, despite being indoors. She inspected the coffee shop with the careful attention of someone checking for traps or witnesses. When her eyes landed on me, I saw her stiffen slightly. She removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that were sharp, suspicious, and lined with expensive makeup. A half-smile of contempt was drawn on her perfectly glossed lips. She approached with deliberately slow steps, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and sat down across from me with an air of arrogance, crossing her legs and leaning back in the chair like she owned the place. "Hello, Destiny," she said, her voice smooth and sharp at the same time, like honey mixed with broken glass. "I didn't expect the model wife to summon her husband's ex to a place like this." She looked around disdainfully. "What are you looking for me for? Need some advice on how to keep a man interested? Because clearly whatever you've been doing isn't working." She paused, letting that barb sink in, then continued with false sympathy dripping from every word. "It's curious, really. How does a woman keep her husband so bored, so unsatisfied, that he has to come running back to his ex just to feel alive again? That must be hard for you to accept." Her words were a deliberate provocation, calculated to hurt me, to see my reaction, to make me lose my composure, and maybe start crying or screaming. She wanted to establish dominance, to make me feel small and inadequate. In another time, perhaps 6 months ago, perhaps before I'd been forced to grow up fast and learn how cruel the world really was, I would have been enraged. I would have burst into tears or lashed out with anger. I would have given her exactly the reaction she wanted. But the Destiny sitting here today had been through too much, had suffered too deeply, had stared down death itself to let cheap jabs from a desperate woman affect her. I looked at her calmly, my face expressionless, and took a slow sip of my coffee before responding. When I spoke, my voice was soft but carried an edge of steel. Simone, I haven't called you here to make a scene of jealousy or to fight over a cheating man like we're on some reality TV show. Honestly? I leaned forward slightly. A man like Darius, with everything I now know about him, I'd gift him to you with a bow on top if you want him. You can have him. I'm done. I paused, watching the confusion flicker across her face. I'm here, I continued, to save you from an imminent disaster before you become a criminal serving time in a federal prison. Before your career is destroyed, your reputation ruined, and your entire life falls apart. Simone let out a laugh that echoed in the quiet intimacy of the coffee shop, drawing a few glances from other patrons. It was a theatrical laugh, forced and brittle. Save me? She shook her head, still smiling, but her eyes had gone hard. That's rich. That's absolutely hilarious. What exactly do I need to be saved from, Destiny? Your paranoid delusions? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a condescending whisper. Look at me. Really look. I have money. I have a successful career. I make 6 figures a year and answer to no one. I have freedom. I go where I want, do what I want, see who I want. She gestured at herself. Why would I need saving? You should worry about yourself, honey. You're the one whose husband can't stand to touch you anymore. Without arguing or rising to her bait, I calmly pulled out my phone from my purse. I opened the photo gallery and selected the image that the private detective had obtained from the security camera near Terrell's office building. I slid the phone across the small table, my movements slow and deliberate. Look closely at this, Simone. Take your time. Her perfectly manicured hand, nails painted the exact shade of her dress, reached for the phone with a slight tremor she couldn't quite hide. She picked it up and stared at the photo, and I watched her face closely, cataloging every micro-expression. The photograph showed her clear as day, even though it was taken from across a street. The timestamp read 2 days before Jasmine's poisoning. There she was, standing in a deserted alley near Terrell's building, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, like she was trying to be inconspicuous, but failing miserably. Terrell was there too, looking around nervously before she handed him a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. The kind of package that would fit in a jacket pocket. The kind of package you'd use if you were passing something you didn't want anyone to know about. The angle of the camera had caught both their faces clearly, despite their attempts at discretion. The day before yesterday afternoon, I said, my voice calm and factual. In an alley 3 blocks from here, you met with Terrell Davis. The little package wrapped in newspaper that you gave him. What was in it, Simone? Documents, like you're about to claim? Or was it misoprostol, the exact drug that almost killed a woman and did kill an unborn baby? Simone's smile vanished instantly, melting like ice under a blowtorch. Her confident facade cracked. She set the phone down on the table with trembling hands, and the expensive sunglasses she'd been holding clattered to the floor. I was just, she stammered, her voice losing all its earlier confidence. This doesn't prove anything. I was just giving him some work documents. Some pharmaceutical samples for the office. It's perfectly innocent." Samples? I raised an eyebrow. Pharmaceutical samples that need to be wrapped in newspaper and delivered secretly in an alley instead of being sent through your company's normal distribution channels? Try again, Simone. She picked up the coffee cup in front of her with shaking hands and took a sip, trying to compose herself. But I could see the panic setting in behind her eyes. The coffee cup rattled slightly against the saucer when she set it back down. I leaned back in my chair, letting her sit in her fear for a moment before continuing. "Simone, let me lay this out for you very clearly so there's no misunderstanding. You're a pharmacist. You know better than anyone the regulations around restricted medications. The police aren't stupid. They're not bumbling TV detectives. They're professionals." I ticked off points on my fingers. As soon as they trace the origin of that batch of misoprostol found in Jasmine's system, and they will trace it, where do you think the trail is going to lead? Every pharmaceutical company keeps meticulous records of every pill, every bottle, every shipment. Your signature will be on the distribution forms. Your access codes will be in the system. Your fingerprints might even be on the bottle. Simone had gone pale under her foundation. Her hands were now clenched in her lap, knuckles white. "And when they come knocking on your door with a warrant," I continued relentlessly, "what are you going to tell them? That you had no idea what Darius was planning to do with it? That you thought he wanted it for legitimate medical purposes? Or are you going to stick with the work documents story and hope they believe you?" She swallowed hard, her throat working visibly. "I didn't know anyone would get hurt. I swear I didn't know." There it was, the first crack in her armor, a tacit admission. "Darius told me," she started, then stopped, realizing she was incriminating herself. I didn't push. Not yet. I let the silence stretch, let her own fear and guilt do the work for me. Finally, I delivered the final blow. "Simone, do you think Darius is going to protect you when the walls close in?" I slid another photo across the table. This one was a screenshot of a text message from Darius's phone, courtesy of Gabrielle's exceptional hacking skills, though I'd never admit that in court. The message was from this morning, sent to Terrell. "Simone is becoming a liability. If police question me, I'm saying she acted alone. She gave me the meds, said they were vitamins. I had no idea. Make sure you stick to that story." Simone read the message, and I watched the blood drain from her face entirely. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment, I thought she might actually be sick right there in the coffee shop. "He's going to throw you under the bus," I said quietly. "You know it's true. You can see it right there in black and white. Darius doesn't love you. He never did. You were useful to him, a tool to get what he wanted, just like Jasmine was, just like I was. And now that you're becoming inconvenient, he's cutting you loose." A single tear rolled down Simone's cheek, cutting a path through her carefully applied makeup. "I thought," she whispered, her voice broken. "He said he was leaving you. He said we'd be together. He promised me that once you were out of the picture, we could finally be together like we should have been all along. He said he never stopped loving me." "And you believed him," I said, not unkindly. "Because you wanted to believe him. Because he's good at lying. He's had years of practice." She looked up at me, mascara starting to run, all her earlier arrogance completely gone. "What do you want from me?" "The truth," I said simply. "I want you to give me proof that Darius ordered this. text messages, recorded phone calls, emails, anything you have that shows he asked you to get him that drug and that he told you what he planned to do with it. I don't have any of that, she said quickly. Too quickly. I just looked at her, letting her sit with her lie. After a long moment, she broke. If I give you what I have, if I testify against him, what happens to me? That depends on you, I said. Right now, you're facing potential charges as an accomplice to attempted murder. That's 20 to life, Simone. Your career is over. Your freedom is over. Everything you've worked for, gone. I leaned forward, my voice becoming gentler. But if you cooperate, if you come forward willingly as a witness who was manipulated and used, if you show genuine remorse and help the prosecution build their case, you might get a deal. Suspended sentence, probation maybe. Your pharmacy license would be revoked, yes, but you wouldn't go to prison. You'd have a chance to start over, to rebuild. Simone was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe away the tears. He told me it was just to make you have a miscarriage. He said you were pregnant by another man, and he needed to get rid of it so he could divorce you without it getting messy. He made it sound like he was the victim. And you believed him, I repeated. I wanted to, she admitted. I wanted to believe that you were the bad guy, that you'd cheated on him, that you deserved it. It made it easier to... She trailed off, unable to finish. To become an accomplice to the attempted murder of an innocent woman and her unborn child? I finished for her. She flinched at the words, but didn't deny them. I pulled a business card from my purse and slid it across the table. It was my lawyer's information. This is my attorney. Contact him within 24 hours. He'll arrange for you to speak with the prosecutor and work out a deal. Bring everything you have, every text, every email, every recording. Hold nothing back. Simone picked up the card with trembling fingers. And Simone, I added, my voice turning hard. If you even think about warning Darius, if you try to destroy evidence or run, I will make sure you face the maximum penalty for everything. I will personally see to it that you spend the next 20 years in prison. Do you understand me? She nodded, unable to speak. Good. I stood up, gathering my things. 24 hours. Don't make me regret giving you this chance. As I walked toward the exit, I heard her voice, small and broken, call after me. Destiny? I paused but didn't turn around. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. Her apologies meant nothing to me. They wouldn't undo the trauma, wouldn't erase the fear I'd felt, wouldn't bring back Jasmine's baby or restore her ability to have children. But her cooperation would give me justice. And right now, that was worth more than all the apologies in the world. The next morning, just as I was leaving the underground garage to head to the office, a figure suddenly blocked my path. I slammed on the brakes of my BMW, heart leaping into my throat, hand instinctively going to my belly to protect the baby. Looking closely through my windshield, I saw it was Terrell. He was standing there in the dim garage lighting, looking furtive and desperate, his head swiveling left and right, as if fearing someone would see him. Dark circles hung under his eyes like bruises, and his usually neat fade haircut looked disheveled. His white dress shirt was wrinkled and untucked on one side. He approached my car cautiously and tapped gently on my window, signaling me to talk to him. His eyes were pleading, pathetic. I didn't want to. Every instinct told me to hit the gas and leave him in my rearview mirror. But I needed to know what he wanted, what Darius was planning next. I rolled down my window just enough to hear him, keeping a safe distance and my finger hovering over the panic button on my phone. "Mrs. Destiny," he stammered, his voice a trembling whisper. "Can I have a minute? Please, I have something very important. Mr. Darius asked me to hand-deliver it to you personally. It's urgent." His voice was shaking so badly he could barely get the words out. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the garage. I smiled with disdain and unlocked the passenger door just enough for him to slip into the car. In the confined space, I could smell him, a sour mixture of sweat, stale cigarette smoke, and fear. He was clearly terrified, probably hadn't slept in days. He pulled a thin manila folder from inside his jacket with trembling hands, placed it on my lap, and withdrew his hand quickly, as if the folder were burning hot coal. "What is this?" I asked coldly, not even looking down at it.
It's an old medical record of Miss Jasmine,"
Terrell stammered, sweat now dripping down his temples.
"Mr. Darius found it this morning. He was going through her desk, and he found it hidden in the back of a drawer."
I raised an eyebrow. Darius was going through Jasmine's desk? Why would he do that? Terrell ignored my question and rushed on.
"Inside here, right here," he tapped the folder with a shaking finger, "is a receipt for the purchase of medication. An abortion pill. She bought it yesterday at a pharmacy, a shady one on the east side."
I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm.
"The boss says,"
Terrell continued, his words tumbling out faster now,
"take this and give it discreetly to the police. Tell them you found it by chance in a drawer of Jasmine's desk when you were looking for a file. That way, Mr. Darius will be free of suspicion and you won't be implicated either. It'll look like Jasmine bought the drug herself, that she was trying to end her own pregnancy, and it went wrong."
I took the folder and opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside was a superficial medical report with Jasmine's name on it and a crumpled receipt printed on cheap thermal paper. I held the receipt up to the light streaming in from the garage entrance, examining it carefully. The handwriting was a barely legible scribble specifying the name of the drug, misoprostol. The purchase date was listed as 2 days ago. The pharmacy's stamp was smudged and looked freshly applied. But the most ridiculous thing, the thing that made me want to laugh at the sheer stupidity of it, was that the ink on the receipt was still fresh. I could smell it, that chemical scent of printer ink that hasn't fully dried. And the paper was pristine, without a single authentic wrinkle or wear mark. The crumpling had been done recently and deliberately to make it look old. It was evident this was a fake invoice, hastily fabricated the night before, probably at some 24-hour print shop or on Darius's home printer. I looked at the receipt in my hands, then slowly turned to fix Terrell with a stare so sharp and cold that he physically shrank back against the passenger door. "You and Darius think I'm stupid," I said, my voice deadly calm. "The ink on this receipt hasn't even dried yet. You're asking me to give this to the police? That's not just asking me to plant evidence. That's asking me to sign my own confession for falsifying evidence and obstruction of justice." Terrell's face went white as a sheet. "No, ma'am, it's not like that. Or maybe," I continued, talking over him, "what you really want is to create a narrative where Jasmine bought the drug herself and tried to self-abort out of depression or desperation. So Darius walks away clean, and I take the blame for knowing about it and not stopping her. Is that the plan?" "Mrs. Destiny, please." Terrell was practically whimpering now. "Get out of my car," I said quietly. But the boss said, I don't care what the boss said. I picked up the folder and threw it back at him. It hit his chest and fell into his lap. Take this trash and get out of my car right now. And you tell Darius that if he wants to stage a play, he needs to hire more professional actors. This amateur hour nonsense is insulting. I reached across him and opened the passenger door. And Terrell? I added as he scrambled to gather the folder and climb out. You're being an accomplice to attempted murder. You better start worrying about your own skin, because when the walls come down, and they will come down, you're going to regret not turning on him when you had the chance. Terrell clutched the folder to his chest and ran from my car like a soul being chased by the devil. I watched his pathetic figure disappear behind a concrete pillar, and I knew with certainty that Darius was desperate. He was drowning in the mud he himself had created, and the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. This clumsy attempt at framing Jasmine wasn't going to save him. It was just further proof of how cruel and morally bankrupt my husband truly was. Back in my office, I immediately called Gabrielle. The atmosphere had become tense, like a command post in the middle of a war. Gabrielle arrived within minutes, her laptop already open and ready. He's panicking, I told her, relaying what had just happened with Terrell in the garage. Gabrielle's eyes flashed with anger. They're getting sloppy. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. I need you to pull together everything we have, I said. All of it. The security footage, the financial records, the emails between Darius and Simone, the photos of the drug handoff. Everything. We're going to present it at tomorrow's emergency board meeting. Tomorrow? Gabrielle looked surprised. That's fast. We can't wait, I explained. Every day we delay is another day Darius has to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses or plan another attack. I want him exposed and removed before he can do any more damage. Gabrielle nodded, understanding. I'll have everything ready. PowerPoint presentation with all the evidence, printed packets for each board member, and backup copies stored in 3 different secure locations in case he tries to hack our systems. Thank you, I said. And Gabrielle, this ends tomorrow, one way or another. That evening, I made a decision I'd been avoiding. I drove to the modest hotel near the hospital where I'd arranged for Mama Pearl to stay. Jasmine had been discharged from the hospital 2 days ago, but she was still too weak to travel. The doctors had given her strict instructions to rest, and I knew Mama Pearl was caring for her. I knocked on the door of room 237. After a moment, I heard shuffling footsteps, and the door opened to reveal Mama Pearl. She was a small woman, maybe 5'2", thin and worn down by years of hard labor. Her skin was dark and weathered, her hands cracked and calloused from decades of working in the fields and cleaning houses. She wore a simple floral dress that had been washed so many times the pattern was fading, and worn-out sneakers with the laces replaced by string. But her eyes were sharp and intelligent, filled with a mother's fierce protective love. "Mrs. Destiny," she said, her voice carrying the thick accent of rural South Carolina. She looked surprised to see me. "What brings you here?" "May I come in?" I asked gently. "I wanted to check on Jasmine and speak with you both." Mama Pearl hesitated, then stepped aside to let me enter. The hotel room was small and basic, but clean. Jasmine was lying on one of the 2 double beds, propped up on pillows. She looked like a shadow of her former self. The vibrant, confident secretary was gone. In her place was a broken young woman with hollow eyes and pale skin. On the small table by the window, I could see Mama Pearl's attempts at making the sterile hotel room feel like home. There were fresh vegetables in a plastic bag, collard greens, sweet potatoes, some homegrown tomatoes. The kind of humble gifts a poor mother brings because it's all she has to offer. "Jasmine," I said softly, "how are you feeling?" She didn't respond, just turned her head away from me to face the wall. Mama Pearl moved to her daughter's side, stroking her hair. "She don't talk much since she found out about," the older woman's voice broke, "about her not being able to have babies no more." The doctor's prognosis had been devastating. The massive dose of misoprostol had caused such severe damage to Jasmine's uterus that her ability to become a mother was essentially gone. For a 25-year-old woman, it was a life sentence. I pulled up a chair and sat down. "Mama Pearl, has anyone from the company reached out to you? Offered you money or asked you to sign anything?" The old woman's jaw tightened. "That Mr. Darius came by yesterday. Tried to give me an envelope with money in it. Said it was for expenses and to help us get back home quiet-like." "How much?" I asked. $5,000, Mama Pearl said, and I could hear the disgust in her voice. "Like my daughter's worth can be measured in dollar bills. Like her future, her babies she'll never have can be bought off." "What did you do?" "I threw it back in his face," Mama Pearl said with fierce pride. "Told him his money was dirty. Told him I'd rather sell my house, sell everything I own, than take blood money from the man who destroyed my child." I felt a wave of respect for this woman who had so little materially, but so much dignity. "Mama Pearl, I need you to know something," I said carefully. "The food that poisoned Jasmine, it was meant for me. Darius prepared it to kill my unborn baby. Jasmine ate it by accident, and she lost his baby instead of me losing mine." Mama Pearl's eyes went wide. Jasmine finally turned her head to look at me, tears streaming silently down her face. "I know what happened between Jasmine and my husband," I continued. "I know about the affair, about the apartment he was paying for, about everything. And I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't hurt, because it does. But what I won't do, what I refuse to do, is let Darius blame Jasmine for this. He's trying to make it look like she bought the drugs herself, like she was unstable and suicidal. I won't let him destroy what's left of her reputation to save himself." "Why?" Jasmine's voice was hoarse from disuse. "Why would you help me? I slept with your husband. I tried to take your place. I deserve this." "No," I said firmly. "You made bad choices. You were young and foolish, and you let a powerful man manipulate you with money and promises. But you don't deserve what happened to you. Nobody deserves that." I stood up and pulled an envelope from my purse. Inside was a cashier's check. "This is Jasmine's final paycheck from the company, plus compensation for her medical expenses," I said, placing it on the bedside table. "It's legitimate, documented, and it's what she's owed. This isn't charity. It's what's right." Mama Pearl looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "We don't need your pity." "It's not pity," I said. "It's justice. And tomorrow, at the board meeting, I'm going to make sure Darius pays for what he did. To all of us." I turned to leave, but Jasmine's voice stopped me. "Mrs. Destiny?" I turned back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at her, this young woman who had lost so much, whose foolish dreams had turned into a nightmare. "Use this as a lesson," I said quietly. "Never build your happiness on someone else's pain. And never trust a man who would cheat on his wife, because he'll eventually cheat on you, too." That night, I went home for the first time since the incident. The house felt wrong, cold and unwelcoming, despite the expensive furnishings and temperature-controlled air. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I found Darius in the living room, sitting on our leather sofa, with a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. He looked haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and he had the beginnings of stubble on his jaw. "You're back," he said without looking up at me.
"Quite a show today at the office. Poor Terrell said you completely humiliated him."
"He deserved it," I replied coldly. "That fake receipt was insulting. Did you really think I wouldn't notice fresh ink?" Darius finally looked at me, and I saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Destiny. All you had to do was give them the receipt, and this whole mess would go away. We could move on with our lives." "Move on?" I laughed bitterly. "You tried to kill our baby, Darius. There is no moving on from that." He stood up abruptly and went to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open and close. He returned with a glass of milk in his hand. "Here," he said, his voice suddenly softer, changing tactics. "Drink this. It'll be good for you. You've been looking so thin lately, so stressed. I worry about you." He placed the glass on the coffee table in front of me, and the way he did it, the overly gentle manner, the false concern in his voice, made every hair on my body stand up. I looked at the steaming glass of milk as if it were a cup of poison, because that's exactly what it probably was. I picked up the glass carefully, feeling the warmth through the glass, and looked Darius directly in the eyes. "Darius, remember the chitlins the other day? You also said they were to take care of me, and Jasmine almost died. Now this glass of milk. Are you sure it only has milk?" His face changed. The fake smile vanished. He took a step back, his eyes darting between me and the glass. "What? What are you saying? You suspect me? I'm your husband. I would never." I stood up, walked calmly over to a large potted plant in the corner of our living room, an expensive ficus that our interior decorator had insisted would tie the room together. Slowly, deliberately, under Darius's stunned gaze, I poured all the milk into the soil around the plant's base, every last drop. "I don't suspect you," I said, my voice like ice.
"I just fear it might agree with me as badly as the chitlins agreed with Jasmine. The plant needs nutrients too. Let's see if it's still alive tomorrow morning." The sound of me setting the empty glass down on the marble end table was dry and resounding in the silent house. Darius stared at me, and in his eyes there was no longer any pretense, no more fake concern or false love, just pure, naked terror. He knew. He knew that I knew everything. The charade of our happy marriage was finally, completely over. That would be the longest night of both our lives, because at dawn, the real storm would unleash and sweep away the remains of our rotten marriage. The next morning, I dressed with particular care. I chose a deep blue power suit that my father had always said made me look like I could conquer the world. I styled my hair in a sleek bun. I put on minimal makeup, just enough to look professional and put together, but not so much that I looked like I was trying too hard. Today wasn't just a shareholders' meeting. It was a reckoning.
Entering the company building, I could feel the tension in the air. Word had spread that an emergency board meeting had been called, and the employees were whispering, speculating, nervous about what was coming. I went directly to the large boardroom on the 20th floor, where the shareholders and the board of directors were already gathered. The room was impressive. Dark wood paneling, a massive oval table that could seat 20 people, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Charlotte. Darius was already presiding at the head of the table, trying to project an air of control and authority. His gray suit looked expensive, but I could see it was slightly too big on him. He'd lost weight from stress. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights, though he'd tried to hide them with concealer.
Around the table sat the 12 members of our board of directors, representing the major shareholders of Thompson Enterprises. These were serious business people, real estate developers, investment bankers, retired executives. They'd known my father, and they'd watched me grow up in this business. Also present was our company's legal counsel, and, sitting quietly in the corner, 2 detectives from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, who I'd invited to observe. Seeing me enter, Darius's gaze flashed with suspicion and barely concealed panic, but he quickly looked away, turning his attention to his notes. He cleared his throat and signaled to Terrell, who was sitting nervously by the door with a laptop, to start the presentation.
"Ladies and gentlemen," Darius began, his voice slightly hoarse, "thank you for coming on such short notice. The main topic today is the approval of the Carolina Shores Eco Resort project, which represents a tremendous opportunity for—" "One moment, Mr. CEO," I interrupted, standing up slowly. The sound of my chair scraping the floor caught everyone's attention. Darius's jaw tightened. "Destiny, this is a strategy meeting, not a—" "Before we talk about how to spend the company's money," I said, my voice calm but carrying clearly through the large room, "I think we need to talk about the moral integrity and legal capacity of the person managing it." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I saw several of them exchange significant glances. Darius slammed his hand on the table, making several people jump. "Destiny, this is inappropriate. This is a board meeting, not a platform for you to air your personal grievances." I didn't flinch. I'd been preparing for this moment, and I was ready. "Darius, having an affair and a child outside of marriage might be a personal matter," I said, looking directly at him. "But using company funds to maintain your mistress, creating shell companies to launder money, and, most grave of all, buying illegal substances to harm others, that is a legal matter that directly concerns the survival of this company." I gestured to Gabrielle, who was standing by the door with her laptop. "The shareholders present here have a right to know if their investments are in the hands of a CEO or an alleged criminal." The room erupted in a murmur of shocked voices. Board members turned to each other, eyebrows raised, questions being whispered. "This is absurd," Darius shouted, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "You can't just make wild accusations without proof." "Oh, I have proof," I said calmly. "Gabrielle?" Gabrielle connected her laptop to the large screen behind Darius. Within seconds, the first piece of evidence appeared. Bank statements showing regular transfers from Thompson Enterprises to TD Management LLC, highlighted in red. "These are unauthorized transfers of company funds," I explained to the board, walking slowly around the table like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "Approximately $4,000 per month, disguised as client entertainment, and representation expenses. In reality, this money was used to pay for a luxury apartment in Myers Park for Mr. Darius's mistress, Jasmine Williams, age 25, who until recently was employed as his personal secretary. Photographs of the apartment building appeared on screen, followed by the lease documents with Terrell's name as the legal representative of TD Management LLC. Darius had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "This is a misunderstanding. TD Management is a legitimate business entity that we use for—" "For what?" I challenged. "Please explain to the board what legitimate business purpose required you to secretly pay $2,500 a month in rent for your mistress's apartment." He opened his mouth, but no words came out.
Gabrielle advanced to the next slide, screenshots of Darius's emails with Simone. "Can you help me with that matter we talked about? Need something effective but subtle." "I'm sure. The situation has become untenable. Need to resolve it quickly and cleanly." This is an email exchange between Mr. Darius and Simone Miller, a pharmaceutical sales representative and his ex-girlfriend, I continued. Notice the date, 3 days before the poisoning incident. Notice the language, effective but subtle. Resolve it quickly. More slides appeared, the security footage from the garage showing Darius's missing hour, the grainy video of Terrell disposing of the black trash bag, the photo of Simone handing Terrell the package. The board members were leaning forward now, some with hands over their mouths, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Mrs. Patricia Henderson, the oldest board member who had been my father's friend, looked like she might cry. "And finally," I said, "I have audio recordings. These were provided by Ms. Simone Miller, who has agreed to cooperate with law enforcement in exchange for leniency." I nodded to Gabrielle, who played the audio file. The room fell into absolute silence. Darius's voice, unmistakable and cold, filled the room. "I want it to look like a spontaneous miscarriage, clean, so I can divorce her without splitting the assets. That pregnancy is an obstacle." Several female board members gasped audibly. Mr. Chen, our CFO, closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. "That pregnancy," I said quietly, placing my hand on my still flat belly, "was our baby. Your grandchild, some of you who knew my father. Darius tried to poison me to cause a miscarriage so he could divorce me without giving me half of what is legally mine. By pure chance, morning sickness that made me give the food to someone else, I survived. But Jasmine Williams, who ate that food, was 6 weeks pregnant with Darius's child. She lost that baby and can never have children again." The room exploded. "This is outrageous! Attempted murder! We need to vote him out immediately. Call the police!" Darius, realizing he was cornered, tried desperately to regain control. He stood up, knocking his chair backward, and pointed at me with a shaking hand. "You're all being manipulated," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She hired people to fake these recordings. She created these documents. It's all fabricated because she wants to take over the company." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too documented. I turned to the board members. "Gentlemen and ladies, I have already sent copies of all this evidence to the police. I have witnesses ready to testify. I propose the immediate removal of Mr. Darius Thompson as CEO to facilitate the investigation and protect the reputation of this company that my father built."
A timid applause started from Mrs. Henderson, and it quickly turned into a full ovation. Even some of Darius's former allies were clapping, their faces set in grim determination. Just as the applause was dying down, the doors to the boardroom swung open. Two uniformed Charlotte Mecklenburg police officers entered, followed by Simone Miller, her face hidden behind large sunglasses, and my attorney, David Richardson. Darius looked at Simone, his face transforming from shock to betrayal to pure rage in seconds. "Simone? What the hell are you doing here?" One of the officers, a tall African-American man with sergeant stripes, approached Darius with a very serious expression. "Darius Thompson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, illegal procurement and distribution of controlled substances, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "This is insane!" Darius screamed, backing away from the approaching officer.
"I didn't do anything. It was all—"
Meanwhile, the second officer headed toward Terrell, who was curled up in a corner like a frightened child, his laptop clutched to his chest. Seeing the police approaching, Terrell completely broke down. Tears and snot ran down his face as he started babbling hysterically.
"I don't know anything. It was all Darius. He forced me to do everything."
He was sobbing so hard he could barely speak.
"He made me falsify the papers, get rid of the evidence, create the shell company. I was just following orders. I'll confess everything. I'll testify. Just please, please don't arrest me."
The speed and completeness of Terrell's betrayal was almost shocking. This was the man who had claimed to be loyal to Darius, who had called him family, who had risked his freedom to help him. And at the first sight of handcuffs, he turned completely. "You traitor!" Darius roared at his cousin, lunging toward him. But the officers were ready. They grabbed Darius by both arms, restraining him. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the now silent boardroom. The hands that had signed million-dollar contracts, that had steered this company, that had once held mine tenderly on our wedding day, were now trapped in cold steel rings. As the officers led him toward the door, Darius stopped right next to where I was standing. He looked at me with eyes that were a mix of hatred, disbelief, and something that might have been regret. "Destiny," he said, his voice breaking. "Since when? When did you start planning this? How could you be so cruel? We were husband and wife. We made vows." I looked at him, really looked at him, for what I knew would be the last time. I leaned in close and whispered in his ear, quiet enough that only he could hear. "Since you brought me that bowl of chitlins, since you tried to kill our child. Cruel? Compared to trying to poison your pregnant wife, sending you to jail is practically an act of mercy. Goodbye, ex-husband."
"I hope prison teaches you what I couldn't, that actions have consequences."
Darius's face crumpled. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the calculated manipulation, it all drained away, leaving behind just a broken, pathetic man who had destroyed everything through his own selfishness and cruelty. The officers led him away, his expensive shoes shuffling on the marble floor, his head hung low. The door closed behind him, but the echo of his arrest remained in everyone's minds. The trial was swift, thanks to the overwhelming evidence and the cooperation of witnesses. Simone Miller, true to her word, testified against Darius in exchange for a plea deal. She received a 2-year suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. Her pharmaceutical license was permanently revoked, and she was fired from her job. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had to sell her condo and luxury car to pay the fines and legal fees. She moved back to her hometown, somewhere in Georgia, taking a job as a pharmacy technician at a small-town drugstore. A massive fall from her previous 6-figure career. One night, about a week after the trial, I received a long text message from her. It was full of apologies, explanations about how Darius had manipulated her, how she'd been blinded by old feelings and the promise of money, how she wished she could take it all back. I read it once, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it. Her regrets meant nothing to me. They wouldn't undo the trauma, wouldn't erase the fear, wouldn't restore what Jasmine had lost. Terrell, in his desperation to save himself, had turned state's witness as well. His testimony about destroying evidence and creating the shell company was damning. In exchange for his cooperation, he received 3 years in prison and was ordered to repay the embezzled funds. His career in business was over before it had really begun. As for Darius's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, she didn't give up easily. She came to my office several times, her designer clothes and expensive jewelry standing in stark contrast to her desperate, pleading demeanor. "He's my only son," she begged, tears streaming down her made-up face. "He made a mistake. He's sorry. Can't you show mercy? Can't you drop the charges?" I showed her the video of Darius's confession, the recording where he coldly discussed making my miscarriage look natural. I showed her the medical reports about what the poison had done to Jasmine. "That pregnancy he wanted to destroy," I said quietly, "was your grandchild, your flesh and blood, and he was willing to kill it just to avoid splitting assets in a divorce." Mrs. Eleanor watched the video, her face going pale, her hands trembling. When it ended, she stood up without a word and left. She never contacted me again. I heard later that she had moved to Florida to live with her sister, unable to face the shame and judgment in Charlotte society. Jasmine and Mama Pearl went back to South Carolina. Before they left, I visited them one last time in their hotel room. I brought them the compensation check from the company, a substantial amount that included medical expenses, lost wages, and a settlement for pain and suffering. "This is too much," Mama Pearl protested, looking at the number on the check with wide eyes. "It's not enough," I replied honestly. Nothing could be enough for what she lost, but it's what I can give. Jasmine, who had been silent throughout most of my visit, finally spoke up. She looked thinner, older, broken in a way that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. "Mrs. Destiny," she said softly, "do you think I'll ever be happy again? Do you think I can ever move past this?" I sat down beside her and took her hand. "Yes," I said. "It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But you're 25 years old, Jasmine. You have your whole life ahead of you. You made terrible choices, yes. You got involved with a married man, yes, but you've paid a price that far exceeds your mistakes. Don't let this define the rest of your life." "How?" she asked, tears flowing. "How do I move on when I can never be a mother? When every time I look in the mirror, I remember what he did to me?" "You get therapy," I said firmly. "You lean on your mama, who loves you more than life itself. You go back to school or learn a trade. You find purpose outside of being someone's wife or mother. And someday, when you're ready, you let yourself love again. But this time, you love someone worthy of you. Mama Pearl was crying too, nodding at my words. And remember, I added, you can still be a mother in different ways. Adoption, fostering, mentoring young girls in your community. Motherhood isn't just about biology. They left Charlotte on a rainy Tuesday morning. I didn't go to see them off. Some goodbyes are better left unspoken. 6 months later, on a clear October night when the Charlotte sky was full of stars, I went into labor. Gabrielle drove me to the hospital, holding my hand and timing my contractions while I breathed through the pain. She stayed with me through the entire labor, 12 hours of intense, exhausting, beautiful agony. "You've got this, Destiny," she kept saying, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest woman I know. You survived a murder attempt. You can definitely survive this." At 3:47 a.m., my daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that filled the delivery room and made everyone smile. "Congratulations," the midwife said, placing the tiny, perfect baby on my chest. "It's a girl, 7 pounds 8 ounces, and she is beautiful." I looked down at my daughter's face, her dark skin, her tiny, perfect features, her eyes that seemed to look right through me, and I started crying. Not from pain or sadness, but from overwhelming joy and relief and love. She was here. She was safe. She was perfect. "Hello, baby girl," I whispered, kissing her forehead.
I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you.
I named her Hope Destiny Thompson. Hope because she represented everything hopeful about the future, a fresh start, a new beginning, a life untainted by the darkness that had almost destroyed us both. A thought shuddered through me as I held her. If that morning hadn't been for the nausea, this sacred moment would never have existed. Fate, sometimes cruel and sometimes miraculous, had taken one life to save another. The day of Darius's sentencing, I didn't go to the courthouse. I couldn't bear to see him again, to give him even one more moment of my time or attention. Instead, I stayed home with baby Hope, feeding her and singing to her and reveling in the simple joy of being a mother. But I watched the news coverage on my laptop while Hope slept in my arms. Darius stood before the judge, looking nothing like the confident CEO who had once commanded boardrooms. He'd lost at least 20 pounds in jail. His hair had gone gray at the temples. He wore an orange prison jumpsuit instead of his expensive suits. The judge, a stern African-American woman named Judge Thompson, no relation, looked at him with unconcealed disgust as she read the sentence. "Mr. Darius Thompson, you have been found guilty of attempted murder, procurement and distribution of controlled substances with intent to harm, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your actions were calculated, cruel, and showed a complete disregard for human life, including the life of your own unborn child." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I hereby sentence you to 12 years in the North Carolina Department of Corrections, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution to Thompson Enterprises for the embezzled funds, and to pay victim compensation to Jasmine Williams in the amount of $250,000. Darius swayed on his feet. I saw his lawyer steady him. On the screen, the news showed him being led away in chains. His expensive life, his reputation, his freedom, all gone. I felt nothing looking at him. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just a vast emptiness where my love for him used to be. I turned off the laptop and looked down at Hope, who was waking up, her little mouth opening in a yawn. "Your daddy made terrible choices, baby girl," I whispered to her. "But that's not going to define you. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, knowing you're valued, knowing you deserve to be treated with respect. And I'm going to make sure of it." 2 years passed. 2 years of healing, growing, and rebuilding. Thompson Enterprises flourished under my leadership. I cleaned house, firing anyone who had been complicit in Darius's schemes, and hiring new, talented people based on merit rather than connections. I implemented strict financial controls and transparency measures. The company's stock price soared. I became known in Charlotte business circles not as Darius Thompson's wife, but as Destiny Thompson, CEO, a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Hope grew into a bright, happy toddler with an infectious laugh and an adventurous spirit. She had started walking at 10 months and hadn't stopped moving since. Gabrielle joked that she was going to be either an Olympic athlete or a disaster, depending on how we channeled all that energy. On a beautiful Saturday morning in late spring, I was in my office on the 20th floor. Yes, I still came in on weekends sometimes. Old habits die hard. When my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Julian Reed, a business partner I'd been working with on a new commercial development project in South End. Julian was 42, owned a successful construction company, and was one of the few men in Charlotte business who had treated me with genuine respect and professional courtesy from day one. He'd never once made a move on me or treated me differently because I was a woman. He was smart, funny, kind to his employees, and devoted to his teenage daughter from his first marriage. The text read, "Hi, Destiny. Beautiful day today. Any chance you and Hope would like to join Maya and me for a trip to the Whitewater Center? We're thinking picnic lunch, and maybe some easy kayaking if Hope is up for it. No pressure, just thought it would be fun. Julian." I smiled, looking out the window at the brilliant blue sky, cloudless and perfect. Since Darius, I'd been so focused on work and Hope that I'd barely thought about dating or relationships. The idea of trusting another man, of letting someone into our lives, had seemed impossible. But Julian was different, patient, respectful. He'd never pushed for anything beyond professional friendship. But I'd noticed the way he looked at me sometimes, with warmth and admiration, yes, but also with a deep respect that Darius had never shown me. I picked up my phone and typed back, "That sounds wonderful. Hope loves the water and making a mess. What time?" His response came immediately. 2:00? I'll bring sandwiches. You bring Hope's energy." I laughed out loud, looking at the smiley face emoji. When was the last time someone had made me laugh like that? I called down to Gabrielle, who was in the building watching Hope in the company's newly created on-site childcare center, another innovation I'd implemented. "Change of plans," I told her. "We're going on an adventure." "An adventure?" I could hear the smile in her voice. "Does this adventure involve a certain handsome contractor with kind eyes and a winning smile?" "Maybe," I admitted. "Is that okay?" "Destiny," Gabrielle said warmly. "It's more than okay. It's about time. You deserve happiness. You deserve someone who sees your worth." That afternoon, sitting on a blanket by the Whitewater Center's lake, watching Hope and Julian's daughter Maya building elaborate sandcastles, while Julian told stories that made me laugh until my sides hurt. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The sun was warm on my face. Hope's laughter rang out, clear and joyful. Julian's arm was casually draped near mine, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. "You okay?" he asked quietly, noticing I'd gone silent. I looked at him, really looked at him, at his genuine smile, his kind eyes, the way he watched Hope with protective care despite having just met her. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "I'm better than okay. I'm happy." "Good," he said simply. "You deserve to be happy, Destiny, after everything you've been through." I didn't ask how much he knew about my past. In Charlotte's tight business community, everyone knew the basic story. But Julian had never pried, never asked invasive questions, never treated me like damaged goods or a victim. He treated me like a successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, and a person worthy of respect. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Hope ran over and climbed into my lap, exhausted from playing. "Mama," she said, her little hand patting my cheek. "Is Mr. Julian our friend?" I looked at Julian, who was watching us with such tenderness that it made my heart skip. "Yes, baby," I said softly. "Mr. Julian is our friend." "Good," Hope declared with the absolute certainty of a 2-year-old. "I like him. He makes you smile." Out of the mouths of babes. Julian reached over and gently squeezed my hand, just for a moment, just long enough to let me know he was there, that he cared, that he was willing to wait as long as I needed. I squeezed back. The sky was an intense blue, cloudless and infinite. The past had dissipated like morning fog, giving way to the warm light of the present and the promise of the future. After the storm, the sun always comes out. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it brings a rainbow. Life has a way of testing us, but it also has a way of healing us if we let it. My name is Destiny Thompson, and this is my story. A story of betrayal, survival, and ultimately, hope.